This talk is a brief history of Arizona mining, and I've tried to touch on the highlights of some of the major mines in the state. In preparing this, I realized what I was doing was trying to present in an hour or so about a 3 or 4 hour college course, 1 hour. So the mines that I cover are not necessarily in chronological order. To be very difficult to do so because in certain periods of time, an awful lot was happening at a lot of different places. So bear with me on that. I throw some maps in every so often to orient you if you're not familiar with Arizona. I'd like to acknowledge the help I received from the Charlotte Hall Museum, especially the Research Center. Most of the photographs are theirs. I have a couple of my own and some others from the Arizona Geologic Survey from David Briggs' reports. And I'd also like to acknowledge Jan Rasmussen, geologist in Tucson, who helped me considerably in lending me a book that was kind of a condensed version of what we're going to be talking about. Pardon I'm probably not all that familiar with this. I may goof up a few times and have to back up on slides, but I've realized when I made this presentation, I was working on a Windows 7 computer, so I think it'll work on this one. And I'll be standing most of the time, although I may sit. Let's see, up in the Coeur d'Alenes, I'm pretty well stoked out, so. The one thing I'd also like to point out, while we talk about miners and some of the rather brave things they did in trying to get into country where the Apaches were not exactly a welcoming committee, the merchants that followed them were equally brave, and more so, because they brought civilization to Arizona. And they had a lot more at risk, not only their scalps, but all their goods. I mean, that is prized stuff to be stolen. So let's not forget about the merchants. They made life what it is. And people like the Goldwaters and the Steinfelds and those pioneer merchants, they also provided banking for the prospectors. They would give them a grub stake, maybe buy their mine out. So the merchants deserve a lot of credit too, and I just didn't have time to get into that. Well, the first, as I considered where Arizona started, it really started with Joseph Walker's expedition. There were other people in here before, but they didn't bring a lot of people in. They were mining mostly silver along the Mexican border, a little bit of placer gold on the Colorado River, but nothing to get excited about. Joseph Walker started in 1861. There were a bunch of other disgruntled people in California that hadn't hit it big. So they decided to come to Arizona. Joseph Walker, in his trips through this part of the world, had heard about gold from the Indians and everything, so they decided to check it out. So they left California in 61 and went to southwest Colorado to kind of get organized. And in 62, about 30 intrepid men took off from Colorado, and they took that circuitous route because of the Apaches. The Apaches were really a terror force, and they came into Arizona. They had some Indians to help them along the way. One of them led them up along the Haciampa River to a certain point, and then he said no more. He wouldn't go any further because of the Apaches. He took off one night, took all the party's tobacco with him, so maybe he was the most popular person. The party that Joseph Walker had, they were very intrepid, hard men. They kept their gunpowder and their flour dry. Everything else was just pack animals. Didn't snowed or anything and got wet. They were tough people. They took nature as it happened. Well, they finally reached the Haciampa River, and they panned their way up. A little bit of gold, but nothing to get too excited about. And they finally went all the way up to the headwaters on Mount Union. And when they got over the other side, the first pan that was taken out, bonanza. It was $4.80 worth of gold. And at that time, gold was $4.67 an ounce. So that's pretty good takings, especially when you consider what wages were those days. Well, you saw the other slide of the original ATV and how hard gold panning was. And I think everybody knows the area well enough to know the area we're talking about. Matter of fact, I can see it better here on this computer, but we're up here at Lynx Creek. Well, you had to be pretty tough to be one of those old timers, and the physical nature of mining was rough. Now, first we have some definitions. Placer mining is where you're panning stuff out of the stream, and all you need for it is a gold pan, maybe a pick and shovel to help dig some of the gravel out, but it didn't take any heavy equipment. If you got into the lode mining, which is in the hard rock, that required some heavy equipment, and unfortunately, the transportation was nil. Pack animals, if you brought it in by pack animals, it would cost you a young fortune. So lode mining didn't take off right off the bat, but the miners, as they panned their way up a creek, where the values all of a sudden dropped off, they'd notice that location and notice where the outcrop might have been that caused that. So they came back for it short order afterwards. And they had to be pretty tough and hard. It took a lot of work. When they started getting into lode mining, they had to drill the holes by themselves, a hammer and a chisel. And once the railroads came in, the equipment they brought was pretty heavy. You didn't handle it too easy. You had to have 2 or 3 men. And we'll see here. Here they are single jacking. This was taken down in Tombstone. And the miner would hit the drill steel with his 3-pound hammer, give the drill steel about a quarter turn because it was a chisel bit and they wanted a round hole, and kept going that way till they got the hole as deep as they wanted it. Double jacking was 2 men, and here you see him drilling an up hole, and one guy's hitting the sledgehammer, usually an 8-pounder. Then he had a trusting partner that held the drill steel and turned it. Now sometimes the partner's trust was misplaced. Then when the railroad came in and they got some equipment, here's an example of the drills that they got in. This lightweight setup here is about 500 pounds between the drill and the column that it's mounted on. Weight, of course, going to vary a little bit depending on the length of the column. Now, what to remember, at the other end of this place, there's an air compressor that weighed even more. So there's a lot of weight to have to haul out. And between the compressor and the drill was pipe, usually iron pipe. So there's a lot of weight to bring out. So you needed good transportation. That's why the railroad was essential. Typical setup when you're driving a drift there. A drift is a tunnel along the structure. 2 men, and they didn't have it very easy. They had to set up that heavy machine, change the drill steels, everything else. So it took 2 men to operate the thing. And after it was, you drilled and you blasted it, then you had to get the broken muck out of there. And hence the shovel and a lot of back-breaking labor. You didn't get labor-saving device in this until about the 1930s when the first successful overhand mucking machine was made. And since that was during the Depression, they didn't catch on too quick because they cost a lot of money. The first ones were made in Eureka, Utah, in a mine shop, and they sold to their neighbors copies for about just under $2,000. But after they sold the patents to IMCO Corporation, IMCO made their reputation, their fortune on that machine, but they sold them for $4,000 a copy. And during the 30s, that was a lot of money. But the way they sold them, they gave them a money-back guarantee. You try it out for a couple weeks, and if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. They never had to give any money back. Now, once you got your ore out, especially for some distance away, you want to make sure it is as high grade as possible if you had to send it out on pack animals to a smelter. So here's some poor guy beating the rocks up and getting the shiny stuff out and throwing the rest away. Now, I have to confess this picture wasn't taken in Arizona, it was taken in Chile. But the principle's the same. The rock is hard. Right after the Walker discovery, word passed pretty fast, and had other parties come into the state looking for gold. Some were successful, like the People's Weaver Party. They found a rich plateau of all places, and they had others following them. Henry Wickenburg, an Austrian immigrant, was one. He didn't manage to get hooked up with any of the parties, but he went out on his own, and darned if he didn't find a good gold mine. And of course, there's a story that he found it throwing a rock at a reluctant jackass or something, but be that whether it is or not, he found a fantastic gold mine. But he didn't know much about mining, so what he did, he let people go in there and mine stuff at $15 a ton in place. And the mine kind of got messed up a bit, but people made some money, and I guess he did too. And the mine itself is at right at Wickenburg. I don't know if I can point it out on this thing or not. Well, I can't go in front and see it too good. I think you can see where Wickenburg is. Any rate, he finally sold the 4/5 of the interest in the mine to somebody that knew how to operate mines, and they operated it quite successfully for quite a number of years. This is the only picture I could find in Charlotte Hall's inventory of the mine itself, where you can see a head frame. The rest of it looks like the old tailings, which were reworked several times. One of the interesting things about the Vulture mine, it's probably the source of the ore that was attributed to the Lost Dutchman gold mine. The people think, and I think it's probably true, he had this mine. He was high grading out of here and needed a cover for it, so he made up this fictitious mine of the superstitions. Whether that is true or not, but I believe it. Then the railroad finally came in. They got to Ash Fork. Then it became important to get connections down from Ash Fork down into the main part of Arizona. Well, a couple outfits tried it. Frank Murphy was successful, and he had the railroad. This is for obvious reasons that you see here. It was called the Peavine. But Murphy did some incredible things on railroading, getting them into difficult places. The branch line that connected the main line at Ash Fork, the Atlantic and Pacific, down towards Phoenix, went through Congress and Prescott and the like, all the important places. And he made his reputation there, but he had also made his reputation in other places, as we'll see in a minute. Now, in this time, the price of silver was pretty high. And with the railroad, you could get it out, and it was worth doing. At the time, the government was coining silver on the basis of 16 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. So basically it boiled down to about $1.29 an ounce, which was a real high price. That was derived from Sir Isaac Newton's work that he did for the Royal Mint in England, when they asked him to find the ratio between gold and silver, and he came up with 16 to 1. 80 to or 90 to 1 might have been a closer one in reality, but they were stuck with 16 to 1. Well, here's Frank Murphy in his younger years. He got tied in with several people in the past. Previously, he had been sort of the fly on the wall for the United Verde transactions of Clark. We'll cover that in a minute. His railroads went to Prescott, and then he started building them along the Bradshaw Mountains. And along with that went the mines. There's a couple of his mines he had an interest in. And of course, with the railroad, they were able to get equipment in to concentrate the ore. And he had a good thing going. He had interest in these mines. they had to ship out on his railroad to a smelter that he had an interest in. I mean, he had it coming and going. Well, during this time, silver, as I said, was at its peak. And here's some pictures I scrounged up from some of the old mines that were very prominent at the time. The Senator, the old one, and here's a revival one, which was probably during the Depression, judging from the cars and the siding on the buildings. This one, don't know what it is. It's probably the mud hole at Walker. Then the Peck mine, and it was one of the famous ones of Arizona. Another picture of the Peck mine. And it was Tip Top, another one. The Tip Top was probably the best all straight silver mine in Yavapai County. And the Little Jesse. And they had a mill that could recover gold and silver pretty effectively because they put a cyanide plant in. Then we'll jump over to the United Verde. In 1880, the United Verde had been having some tough times, and a couple people that were friends of Dr. James Douglas asked him to have a look at the mine. He was going to come out to Arizona to Bisbee on a job for the Williams brothers, who were having trouble smelting the ore. So as a favor to a friend and $500, he made a detour to look at the United Verde to see if it was worth these people keeping their option. And he told them it was, but the mine wouldn't be worth anything until the railroad came. Well, they exercised their option. Then Dr. James Douglas had looked at it, and the mine came up for sale. And unbeknownst to the people, local people, this man was very interested in it, but he had seen samples of the rich ore at the New Orleans World Fair that Frank Murphy had arranged some exhibits of Yavapai County ore, and Clark noticed them. He also had access to the books of a place that had been receiving some of it and knew there was good silver content in it. So he was sort of quiet bystander, and Phelps Dodge made an offer for the United Verde that they thought was good, but wasn't good enough, and Senator Clark outbid him and got it. Now, the rumor is that Frank Murphy is sort of a fly on the wall and supplying Clark with information as how negotiations are going. Don't know if that's so or not. A map for any of you that don't know where United Verde is, Jerome. It's right between Prescott and Clarkdale. At the time, the ore at the United Verde was high grade, but it was sulfides. So they had to burn the sulfur off. So they'd put the ore in piles and then set it on fire and burn it. And that got rid of the sulfur and also all that pesky vegetation you had around. It had nice bare hillsides. And then they'd take it and smelt it in this little water jacket furnace. This is sitting at Jerome, and they say it could produce 3 million pounds of copper a month, which I guess it could if they had the water and they had could get coke, which was another element you needed. And here's a picture of Jerome I got from the museum. It's probably 1895 or thereabouts, because by then Senator Clark had taken the mine over in late 88, and he had started to run it, and he had a proper smelter there. As you can see, they weren't burning it on the hillside anymore. Here's a better picture of Jerome, this panoramic. I'm guessing it was about 1900, but there's no date on it. The United Verde had to go to an open pit, not that they really wanted to at the start, but they had a fire underground. The popular theory is, and probably the logical one, they had slippage along a fault line, and that produced heat and got the sulfide ore burning. Sulfide ore will burn, and of course the more sulfur in it, the worse it gets. And the smoke in the mine was starting to make it unworkable for a lot of people. I mean, you just couldn't work in that heavy sulfur smoke, and they tried a lot of different things to extinguish it, and to control it. And it was a lot of big problem. So they finally decided to try open pitting. By then, equipment had improved a little, and so they went to open pit. As you can see, it's a small, constrained area and pretty tough to get railroad trains around. And it was probably the first open pit in Arizona to use trucks. These were just 10-ton trucks, but they hauled ore out of the tight areas. And here you see them loading the burning ore and dumping down draw pockets to pull it out on the railroad. And it was an effective way of doing it. They were able to get the mine workable again. And actually they mined an awful lot out of the open pit, probably maybe even more than they originally intended to. To do the open pit, they had to move the smelter, which was needed to be done anyway because the smelter is suffering from subsidence from the mines, and it was hard keeping the equipment level. So they built a new one down at Clarkdale, and they looked over pretty carefully. Clarkdale is probably first Arizona's planned community. They had houses planned out for the bosses had houses in one area, the technical people in another, and the like. So it was Arizona's first planned community. And as you notice, the smoke looks a little dense. Well, a good way to get rid of bed bugs, I guess. Now, at the same time that Jerome was starting to flourish, George Hull bought up property around the United Verities stuff, and he kept buying property and everything, and he sold lots to people. He kept the mineral rights and gave them the top 25 feet, and if there's any damage from mining operations, too bad, but they had the top 25 feet. So that caused a lot of the problems in Jerome. You saw the sliding jail and stuff if you've been over there. And in 1899, he incorporated the United Verde Extension Mining Company. And they thought that one of the properties he had there would lead to a faulted extension of the United Verde ore body. Well, there's been a lot of theories as to that. And he did development work and soon ran out of money. And he got some new money in by James S. Clark, Dr. Clark's son, who had done quite a bit of mining himself. And Jimmy Clark put money in. When they ran out, he got some of his mining buddies to put some more money in. So they kept plugging away. And right after an expert told them that they weren't going to run any, they ran into some 45% copper, and the rest is history. They had a nice little ore body. It lasted them till 1938 when they was exhausted. The company didn't pull any punches. They told the people it was shutting down, and people didn't, or I guess didn't really believe it. The stock didn't follow suit. This is the United Verde the United Verde extension, about 1920. And there's the Little Daisy Hotel, which is now a private residence. And here it is, recent picture. I took this a few years ago, but the Edith shaft and the Audrey shaft. The Audrey shaft is the one that has a piece of plexiglass over it, and you can stand and look down the shaft. Because it's deeper than the Empire State Building is tall. As far as shafts goes, it's not very deep. There's others like most recently completed in Arizona, it's over 6,000 feet deep, but for the time, I guess the Audrey is pretty good. There's another view of the mine with the Edith shaft, the Audrey shaft, and there in the background is the Douglas Mansion, which is now the State Museum. In 1964, it was on the market for $10,000. No takers. It probably would have been a money pit, but they gave it to the state, and the state has made it into a rather nice museum. United Verde Extension had to have their own smelter, so they built one. down in Cottonwood in an area called Clemenceau. And the stack, as noted here on the slide, for one day at 426 feet was the tallest, 25 feet was the tallest stack in the world. But I don't think they kept that record very long, but at least they had it for a short period. Paul Lindbergh, a good geologist, made a slide of his presentation at the museum of the metals produced. And as you can see, Jerome produced a lot of copper and a pretty fair amount of zinc, but silver and gold were really impressive. Then we'll go on to Congress. Once the railroad got around, the Congress mine really became viable. And Frank Murphy had gotten in partnership with Diamond Joe Reynolds, who owned the Congress mine. And when Diamond Joe died, Frank Murphy was able to buy out the total mine. So it was his mine. It was started out not doing too good because the ore was very refractory. It wouldn't respond to treatment at the time, which is amalgamation, doing it with mercury. But once they got a little deeper, the ore was respond to that. But when it really paid off was when cyanide was introduced about 1895, thereabouts, and the cyanide was a very effective way of getting the gold and silver out. But here's some pictures of Congress. Of course, its location, it's near the town of Congress and near, not too far from Wickenburg, down in the rather warm country. There's pictures of the mine. More pictures of the mine. Here's some pictures underground. It was a fairly, well, not a very steep dipping ore body. And here they are lowering cars down to the next level. Here's a couple of miners driving drift. And what really impressed me is to see that they had drill steel, hand steels and the like, because they had a railroad there. But I don't know why they were driving the drift with hand steels, but maybe they trusted each other on a sledgehammer. I wouldn't. And this is the picture that really impresses me. That's President McKinley. He made a trip to Congress, and here he is posing for the kids for pictures. And notice, 7th of May, I'm sure that they weren't having a cold snap then, but here he is decked out in suit and tie and everything, patiently waiting for the kids to take his picture. I guess back then people didn't let weather interfere with their dress. Today, we dress for comfort, not for appearances. Near Congress is Octave, a very similar mine. It operated, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Finally, American Smelting and Refining got a hold of it and operated it up until the closed by legislative action L208 at the start of the Second World War, when the government decided that miners should be employed getting copper, iron, lead, zinc, and other stuff out, and not gold. So they shut all the gold mines down. And here in our own backyard, here's another gold mine, the McCabe. You go to Humboldt, turn up the road there by the ugly tailings pond, and go a couple miles and you're at McCabe. In the middle is the Gladstone shaft, and down here at the corner is the McCabe shaft, which didn't amount to a heck of a lot, but it was kind of a crooked thing. This was the main one. And here's the town of McCabe. And it was apparently a pretty progressive town. In 1900, they had a telephone line into Preston, and they had electric lights. So they were right up pretty good. Well, McCabe had several ups and downs. During the Depression, it had a revival. Then Creek managed to break through and flood the mine out, shut it down. Then this is one of the drifts in the old drifts in the McCabe. I took that picture in 91 or 92. You can see how wide the vein was, about 4 or 5 feet there. Then the last gasp at life was a promoter had the Stan West Company in there, and they promoted the place and operated it. And about the time they were reporting their operation going, I heard from a salesman that had shut it down. And a few months later, Magma took it over and thought they had a better way to mine it. And as you can see, they made some modification to the mill, but you can see here that they had Stan West got a shaft sunk, a new one, the Sooner shaft, because Oklahoma people had invested, and they redid the mill to a flotation mill instead of cyanide. And they were operating in 93, and the drift to the escapeway caved in, and that shut them down. And one thing I have to say for BHP, which had since taken over Magma, they did a good job of shutting the place down. You can't even tell where the shaft was. So maybe that's one gold mine that they won't come back to lure people into investing in a real dog. Now we'll go down to Bisbee. The gentleman, Ben Williams, and his brother had picked up some good claims there at Bisbee, and they were having trouble smelting the ore. So Ben Williams contacted Dr. James Douglas, who at the time had the reputation of being the man for copper, to come out and set him straight. Williams came out after his little side trip to Jerome and advised him, and he was very impressed with what there was there. So he came back later to buy claims, but at the time he was very impressed. And we know where Bisbee is, right down almost to the Mexican border. Let's see if I'm going to pick it out here. I think it's down around in here. Well, Dr. Douglas a year later goes back to Phelps Dodge and buys some claims, starts operating, and Bisbee flourished. Here's a picture about 1909 of the town. And you can see it's a pretty big place, especially for then. And the town has shafts all over the place. It was good ore, and they kept finding more as they kept stepping out, a couple of the main ones. And of course, the main thing now is the Lavender Pit. At one time, Phelps Dodge tried a pit on Sacramento Hill, but they had the same problem United Verde had, that it was with the equipment, it was very hard to do anything. It was railroads just didn't negotiate the tight curves. So Sacramento Hill wasn't too successful, but the Lavender Pit was, and it got most of the stuff that Sacramento Hill didn't. Just a little bit north of Bisbee, Ed Shefflin had been prospecting, and the soldiers around there told him the only thing he was going to find where he was looking was his tombstone. So he did. He found his mine that operated he found it in 1877, and on September 3rd of 1877, he recorded the tombstone claim in the county seat, which at the time was in Tucson. Back then, Arizona didn't have very many counties. If you look at a map of Arizona at the time the territory is established, Yavapai County covered more than half the state. At any rate, mine at Tombstone was very successful. And here you see several pictures of different mines around there. At around 500 feet, just a little over 500 feet, they started encountering water, which was good and bad. It meant that they didn't have to haul the ore off to the San Pedro River to mill it, but it meant as an expense to pumping it out. Okay, the next place we go to is the Silver King Mine. And I think I can plot it out here. Whoop, pardon me. Told you this would happen. The Silver King Mine, okay, where's my little dot? Right here. It's basically, if you know where Superior is, that's where the Silver King Mine was. And it was a good silver mine during the high day prices of silver. And If you notice, there's the familiar mountains behind it, and you see it's Superior. And William Boyce Thompson ended up buying into the place. A second mine started. The Silver King was depleted about 1893. Another little mine, the Silver Queen, started and found some little pockets and operated intermittently, but it kept picking up copper. And William Boyce Thompson bought it and converted it into a major copper mine. It was a real bonanza, the Magma mine. William Boyce Thompson was quite a promoter. Not a promoter, but a developer. He had the Shannon Copper Company that operated very successfully down in Morenci area. Then the Magma. He also founded Inspiration Copper Company, which later merged with one of Anaconda's property and became Inspiration Consolidated. And he got out of that. I guess he didn't like dealing with Anaconda. And ultimately ended up founding a Newmont Mining Corporation. And Magma stock was a good part of Newmont. There's a mill that they built in the 20s at Superior for the Magma ore, which seemed to be getting good and getting more and more as they went down in it. It was chalcopyrite and bornite, both good copper ores. And after Magma shut down, they've been doing some drilling in other companies also. And lo and behold, they found a big ore body. So here we have an interesting picture. The number 9 shaft with the vertical head frame, which was Magma. And I don't know how deep it went. It was, I think, just shy of 4,000 feet. And the Resolution number 10 shaft. And Resolution is the deepest single pass shaft in the country, 6,448 feet. So that puts you down below sea level. And of course it's going to be nice and toasty warm, so they'll have some interesting problems getting it mined if they ever get the problem with the Indians resolved. But they have about a 2 billion ton reserve of 1.5% copper, also carries some good moly. So it's going to be, it can supply probably a substantial portion of the copper needs of this country once they get it going. But it's not going to be a fast and easy one. There's a lot of work to be done there. Well, we're back to Frank Murphy again. And one of the things he got going was the Development Corporation of America. He had goods, made quite a bit of money on his mining ventures here in Yavapai County, and he branched out. And you see him with some of the mining people of the time. And Silver Bell was the next target. They were mining copper in Pima County, a bunch of little mines. And he saw a future there. Copper was starting to pick up, so he invested there. Here's a couple of the little mines at Silver Bell. The time was all underground. And he built a smelter, the Sasco Smelter, Southern Arizona Smelting Company. And it operated for a few years. And then all of a sudden, everything went wrong. Price of copper tumbled, like it always does. And at the investment that they made in Tombstone, the Development Corporation of America invested heavily in the mine at Tombstone. Pumps broke and mines flooded. Everything just went to hell in a hurry. ASARCO bought them out in Silver Bell. Of course, not at any profitable price, but they did get something. And the property sat idle, and a few years later, ASARCO looked at it as a potential operation and made, I think, probably their first mining venture for an open pit mine. ASARCO generally had made their money in smelting. But here they had an open pit, a concentrator, and shipped the concentrate off to their smelter at Hayden. And it operated for 30 years. And then, again, copper prices were bad, a lot of labor problems and everything else. They shut it down. It sat idle for a little longer, and then about, I think, 1993, they went to a solvent extraction electrowinning operation, which there you see the plant and the output. Been quite a successful one, as one of my out-of-town guests will attest to that. A panoramic picture of Silver Bell. As you can see, they've dug all over the place. Did you get it? Okay. Whoop. Okay, now we'll shift over to Morenci. Morenci right now is the nation's largest copper mine and has probably the largest known proven mineable reserve. We don't know what'll happen with resolution, but Morenci's right up there. One of the early explorers that found claims there was Robert Metcalf. And as most prospectors do, they needed financing. So he goes over to Silver City, the nearest civilization to Clifton, Morenci area, and hits up one of the leading merchants, Henry Lazinski. Well, the Lazinskis are impressed. They invest in it and ultimately buy Metcalf out. And they go through a lot of problems, but they produce copper and are making money at it. But ultimately, when the price of copper got good and they managed to have a chance, they sold their holdings to a Scottish firm who funded the Arizona Copper Company, and they sent James Cahoon over there as an assayer. He worked his way up to become president of the company and did an awful lot to advance copper mining and technology. His doesn't get received near the amount of credit that he's due, but his methods in metallurgy are astounding. Also in the area, William Church got claims in the area and founded the Detroit Copper Company. And he needed some money to expand the mines. So he goes boldly strolling into the offices of Phelps Dodge and Company, which at the time was a mercantile company. But they needed copper, so he approached them for a $50,000 loan. Well, they sent out Dr. James Douglas to look at the property and advise him. And he gave a positive report. So PD invested in Morenci, and Morenci was actually Phelps Dodge's first entry into copper. Short time later, Bisbee followed, but Morenci is the number one. And we have to look at this map because the map I had couldn't get to Morenci. We look here at Clifton, in the eastern part, I believe. Where are we at? About in here, I think, is Clifton. Clifton's just down from Morenci. Well, the Zinskis had problems, like everybody did, developing a mine. Their mines were up in the mountains and they needed a smelter site down in the flat. So they built a road, and here you see the ore being hauled down by mule trains. But one big problem was the Apaches didn't especially appreciate the company, and they also liked the livestock that was being flashed before their eyes, so they would attack the ore trains. Well, the Lazinskis had realized they needed better transportation, so this was their solution. A little train, I don't know if it's still there, but there was one in front of the minerals building in Phoenix, which is no more. There's also one in Clifton on exhibit. And it was at one time thought to be the first railroad in Arizona, but it wasn't. A couple others beat them to the punch. But at any rate, they put a train to haul ore down, and Indians didn't have a heck of a lot of use for a locomotive, so they quit bothering the trains. One of the prize mines was the Longfellow. It had a lot of very high-grade ore, and they later put a mill in, and this is a photograph of it. It was, for a short period of time, it was the mainstay of the Arizona Copper Company. Detroit Copper, likewise, had their big mines, and they sort of copied each other on concentrating ores. They developed methods of concentration of the ores, and until then, people just basically took the copper ore and direct smelted it, and by concentrating it, they were able to get a higher grade stuff and more out of the smelter. At any rate, this is one of the places at Morenci. Notice the head frame and the works that go down from it. They also had inclines at Morenci because a lot of the mines were up on top and they needed to get the ore down to the bottom to haul it off to the smelter. And this is one of the inclines, the Coronado. And if you read the Courier, about a month ago, they reported in the days past about a accident here. The ore car jumped the tracks. I think it came undone or the rope broke and killed 10 miners. And you can imagine the ride it would be on that incline if a rope broke. And the Arizona Copper Company kept building concentrators. They didn't shut one down as they built a new one. They just kept adding to them. This is the last one, number 6. And it was their prize concentrator. When Phelps Dodge took the operation over, they kept it. And then during the Depression, when everything was shut down, they used this building for experimental work on the metallurgy for the clay ore body, which is the basis of the big open pit at Morenci. And when they developed the clay ore body, they were faced with a dilemma, open pit or block caving. They fortunately chose open pit, and here's how they handled it. Here's locomotive being loaded up by a shovel. But they had plenty of room there. They didn't have the tight curves to negotiate. Well, here's the mining that you do today. Big shovel, big truck. And that previous one was, shovel might have been 8 yards. Here you're looking at 34-yard shovel, 191-ton truck. But this is the big one at Morenci. They solvent extraction electrowinning, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But they have this huge tank house and all these copper cathodes being produced. And that's Morenci's bread and butter. Okay, now we go on to, pardon me, what was for a long time as Arizona's first open pit, and for a while it was Arizona's largest copper mine, out here in the middle of nowhere in Pima County. I think I got it in here. Ajo. Ajo was started by John Greenway, who came from the lake country in the Great Lakes, open pits. He was manager for Calumet in Arizona, which was neighbors to Phelps Dodge and Bisbee. There's this photograph and the picture of them in the statue that's in Statuary Hall in the Capitol building. They started stripping the Ajo ore body in about early 1900s. I think this was 1909. But here's a picture of the finished product there. As you see, a nice big round open pit, looks like a saucer, the reduction works, and the smelter. It got shut down during the big copper strike that happened in 68, I believe, and I don't believe it's reopened yet. Ultimately, it'll probably reopen because there still is ore left there, but it won't be the size operation that it was before with the smelter and everything. But here is one of the many scams that have plagued Arizona's mining, the McGahan smelter. Ajo has had a double whammy of scams. A guy by the name of Shotwell convinced some people in St. Louis area to invest in it. He did a very convincing job, showed some crushed rock with a little bit of acid on it, and took a pocket and put in a copper knife, got copper plated. Took them out there when in springtime when they had water to run the mill and everything. And these people in St. Louis were really impressed, and they bought stock in it and got their friends buying stock. Well, they were having problems developing it, and this guy by the name of McGahan comes by, and he has this wonderful furnace that's going to solve their problems. So they decide to finance that. And it's quite a marvel. It has these spigots, and he had the bottom that would draw off gold, and then the next one above silver. Look, at the very top, you'd be able to draw off hydrogen and oxygen and stuff like that. So once you fired it up the first time, you'd never need to buy any more fuel. I mean, it was going to be perpetual motion. Well, they got conned on that finally. They realized it and shut it down, but they were kind of embarrassed. They'd invested money in it. Their friends had invested money. And so finally when The new Cornelia Copper Company, from Calumet in Arizona, came along. At least it rescued them. They got something for their investment. But it was one of the many scams that Arizona's had. About early 1900s, the Lewisons, who also were in the copper business, wanted some more copper, and they had J. Park Channing, one of the consultants at the time, look for it for him. And he went to the Globe area and looked at the properties there, and he was impressed with what Blackjack Newman had. Newman wasn't his real name. He came from some Central European country with an impronounceable name, and when he hit the States, they put him on the payroll as the new man. And he was quite an entrepreneur. He invested in anything he could that would make money. He was a pretty rich guy. He had had claims in the Globe, Miami area, and took Park out to see these claims. And he liked what he saw. He had looked at other properties down at Ray and around the Globe area, and he liked what he saw that Newman had. So he invested in that on behalf of the Lewisons. And I think everybody knows where Miami is. It's the town next to that little place they call Globe. The outcome was that they developed the Miami Copper Company, which was a high-grade operation for the time. It was porphyry copper, but it was about 2.5%. The others were running about 1.5%. They hit ore within about 220 feet of their first exploration shaft, and developed enough to start a 6,000 ton a day operation, which ultimately kept expanding. Here we see it at probably its peak with the mill and the mine in the background. You see the head frame and the mill. It also had an interesting problem, subsidence. And if you read the Courier in April, they had some subsidence that came all at once, and the air blast killed a few people and threw ore cars quite a ways down the drifts. It was that violent a subsidence. So they learned to live with that, plan for it. Here's a panorama of Miami, and you see the town. The top is the town, and then you see the mine, and out here you see see if I can find my little dot. The tailings pond off to the side. The other one is off a postcard, and you see the mine and the powerhouse. The powerhouse is, there we go. Powerhouse had 2 stacks on it. Some of the old ones only had 1, but this one, they added a second stack to it, and the tailings pond. Next door to Miami, you had Inspiration. The Inspiration Consolidated Copper Company, and here was their Thornton shaft, the twin shafts, and their operation. They also had another one at the Live Oak over the hill, and it fed this mill here. Well, when they were building this plant, about 19 in the early teens, they were going to be conventional, gravity separation, and they heard about the promising results that flotation was having. At the time, they thought that copper sulfides wouldn't float. And down at Braden Copper Company, they had found otherwise, and they had good results floating copper. They were at the time, Braden was recovering extra copper out of the tailings with the flotation circuit. So Dr. Ricketts, who was Inspiration's consultant, had him stopped all work on the gravity system and experimented with flotation. And Inspiration was the distinction of being the first all-flotation copper plant built. They didn't have gravity separation. Pretty soon everybody was doing that. And there's a picture of the inside of the mill. Not only did flotation get proved out, but those ball mills that you see here are likewise proved out there. The Marcy mill, at the time everybody thought that the Hardinge mill, which was a cylindro-conical one, was the answer, but these in competitive tests were proven superior. This is an isometric of the system that was developed at Miami Copper that was rivaled the open pits for cost and block caving. And actually the block caving system that Inspiration brought in was developed at Utah at Bingham Canyon, and Anaconda's consultants thought it was the best way to go. So they brought the mine superintendent down, and he introduced that at Inspiration. And pretty soon Miami coppered it and added some better touches to it. And it was primarily used all over. There at San Manuel, which for a short period of time was the world's largest underground copper mine, they used it, and it was very successful. Well, now we go to just a little bit south to Ray. Just a little bit south of Superior. Let's see if I can find it on the map for you. Probably not. I don't have very good luck on this thing. Yeah, let's see. I think it's raised somewhere around in here. But at any rate, Ray started out as an underground mine also, block caving. There's a picture of one of the early days. See the head frame in it, ore bins. Some more pictures of Ray. It and Miami were about contemporaries. I think Miami beat him into production and shipping concentrates by about 3 weeks before Ray did. Another picture of Ray in the old days. And there's what you see at Ray today. Open pit. Then you come back here to Humboldt, smelting. And there was one of the early smelters that ended up burning down, so they built new ones. And there's one of the newer ones. And then in 1906 they built them, a modern one, and it was just demolished. The stack was, a new stack was put in there, not that one there, but a taller one. And if you remember, about 2 years ago they demolished it. They seem to have a vendetta against smokestacks. Everybody's got rid of their smokestacks. Morenci and in Nevada at Ely, they got rid of that one there. So kind of sad. They were good guideposts. But here's one stack still around, and the Big Ledge Mining Company. It ran, they say their smelter ran almost a week before it shut down and went broke. There's a little more to that, though. The Big Ledge Company was promoted by some people in Duluth, Minnesota. Their stock sold on the Boston Exchange. Capitalized probably. They had 2.8 million shares outstanding, and they, through their promotion, they ran the price up to $6 a share. The smelter is going to be fed by two mines, the Butternut, which is a copper mine, and the Henrietta, which was a gold mine. And the mines themselves were probably pretty good mines, but they devoted their energies and efforts to building this showpiece. And they fired it up. It lasted a week. I don't know if they even really had a smelter or not, because from what I can see, there's no foundations or anything. But at any rate, the people got taken to that. The insiders sold short, made a lot of money. The rest of the people were left holding the stack. But the ones that did keep their stock certificates, I mean, it didn't come out too bad. I noticed if you got a 100 shares certificate of Big Ledge Copper Company in good shape, it was worth $100. So today, so some of those old penny stocks had really pretty certificates, and sometimes it'd pay off, generally not. Okay, here we come, the Iron King. There's an aerial view of it. There's that big ugly tailings pond that you see from the highway, which was operating pretty successfully until the California EPA decided it was a hazardous waste and ironite was going to poison everybody. Another view of the Iron King. Amazingly enough, this mine in its life produced about $1 billion worth of different metals, but to start with, it was kind of a mess. It had enough zinc in it that really messed up the concentrates. Nobody wanted the stuff. So finally, Fred Gibbs bought the thing at a tax sale and figured with flotation he could make some of it. 100-ton-a-day flotation mill, and he was able to get the zinc out and have a zinc concentrate, sell the other stuff. So he became profitable. Finally, they expanded, and finally, Shattuck Den, which was operating down at Bisbee, their mines were depleted, and they wanted a mine to go to, so they bought the Iron King and operated until it was out of ore, and I think it depleted in 68 or thereabouts. It was definitely depleted. Then we go last, not least, to Baghdad. I think everybody knows where Baghdad is. It's a town you don't go through, you go to it. But the road ends there. Back in the 1920s, they were struggling, trying to get it going. It had been discovered years earlier, but had a lot of problems. A long ways away from anything, the railroad and everything else. So here you are at 1920s. And then probably about 1930, 1940, it started looking up. They got a $2.5 million loan from the Reconstruction Finance Corporation and got a power line brought in to bring power in from Parker, and built mill, developed the mine for block caving, but they never were able to get it up to the 4,000 tons a day they wanted to. And then John C. Lincoln, for some reason, decided to buy it. He was out looking around at the Vulture mine, and he ran across Ernest Dickey, liked him, and he buys the mine and puts Ernest Dickey in as manager. Well, Dickey converts it to an open pit, and in the process he also makes it into sort of a testing ground for construction and mining equipment, and a lot of equipment got improved as a result of those tests. Here they're doing different kinds of trucks, see which is the better one, and they ran pretty exhaustive tests. Well, here's the this is 10 years ago. I could not get a modern picture of Baghdad's pit. It's gotten bigger, obviously, and right now, from word is that Baghdad is going to double its capacity from 40,000 to 80,000 ton a day. They're going to have autonomous trucks, so you aren't have truck drivers hauling that stuff out. And great and wondrous things are promised. They got, through the work that Freeport-McMoran's done, they got a pretty sizable ore reserve where if they don't expand, it supposedly it'd last them 80 years. If they do expand, 40 years. Now that's longer than I'm not going to be around. Now, the reason copper has been able to survive as long and the grades keep falling, the technology has really kept it alive. One of the best ones is the solvent extraction and electrowinning. And this is a simple diagram of what you do. You put the dilute sulfuric acid on the stockpile of ore, collect the stuff at the bottom, which has a little copper in it. You run it into an ion thing where the copper is selectively picked up by certain ions. Then you upgrade those ions, strip it, and end up with a pretty blue solution. And take that into a tank house, plate it out, and there you have beautiful 99.99 copper. When I came to, when Arizona became a state, you can see how many mines there were. And those were all underground operations. Then, a few years, in 1960, when I came to Arizona after graduating, when I was young and dumb, there were some open pits, not too many underground mines, some mills, and a lot of smelters. Well, in 73, I came back to Arizona with my family. By then, there were a few more open pits. Underground mines were not as many, and a lot of them were just under development. And 2 SXEW plants, new critter. and some concentrating mills. Today, we have open pits, we have one underground mine under development, and a bunch of SXEW plants, and some concentrators. So mining has changed a lot. We have one smelter operating in the state. Hopefully there'll be two. Hopefully Hayden will get back online. One of the side notes, in this country right now, there's a operating copper smelter in Utah, one here in Arizona, Miami, and hopefully the Hayden one will be in operation. And that's it for all this country. 3 copper smelters is all we got. So it's come down a lot. The major technology that's made this possible has been, in mining, you got better drills and better explosives. Used to use dynamite, which is pretty expensive. Now you can use fertilizer stuff, ammonium nitrate and a little diesel oil. You got better loaders, great big front end loaders and big shovels. And underground you got mucking machines. You don't have to use a shovel anymore. Big loaders, bigger trucks, better trucks. In process, you got flotation, which is the big turnaround at about the turn of the 9th century in the 1900s, and cyanide to recover gold, and then the SXEW. It's been quite a bit of improvements in those things. And as a result, places that the waste dumps of old are now the ore deposits of today. They're being leached and making a lot of money. Some of the changes on drills, you see there was the old heavy drill. Then off to the side is the jackleg drill, which would weigh 100 to 120 pounds. One man could handle them. Then today you have hydraulic powered drills, which are pretty nice. You don't have to mess around with compressed air. Generally have a nice powered vehicle to take them on. On the open pits, when I started in mining, they were just phasing out the churn drills. You'd see a bank of them banging around and getting the whole blast holes at the open pits. They were replaced by rotary drills, and one rotary drill easily take care of all the churn drill holes. And that's it. Finis.